I want to welcome you to our celebration of 44 years of caring for the Lower Eastern Shore. This morning we gather to celebrate excellence, commitment, and dedication of partners and collaborators that have supported Coastal Hospice throughout those years. We have an exciting morning ahead, filled with joy and gratitude. Whether you're here to support a colleague, cheer on a friend, or support our event, we thank you for joining us. First of all, I want to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guests. If you look at the screen up here, you'll see that we have our sponsors listed. Also want to welcome our elected official, and please stand when we recognize you, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza. Coastal Hospice board members, would you please stand? Coastal Hospice staff. Our volunteers, please stand. And of course, community partners nominated today for this award. Welcome to your event. Now, before we dive into the awards, we have a special presentation for you. Some of you are very familiar with him and may know him as the host of Emmy-nominated PBS show Legacy List with Matt Paxton, or from the 12 years he spent helping people on A&E's Hoarders. He is not only an expert on helping people downsize and organize their homes, he also helps families find their hidden treasures, talk about their heirlooms, and share the stories and the precious memories attached to those items. He is here to inspire you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matt Paxton.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm the guy from Hoarders. Why is the guy from Hoarders here to talk about hospice? All right. I was asked to talk about what hospice means to me. Believe it or not, in my line of business, we interact with caregivers in hospice quite a bit. Right? I started off cleaning out hoarded homes 25 years ago. We'll talk about that why in a minute. But a lot of the times we get called now is we get called at near end-of-life situations where someone needs to clean through the house. They don't want to leave the stuff for their kids to go through, and they want to do it very quickly. No one's ever called me like, hey, man, I got 5 years to go, and I got a lot of money. Let's start thinking about this. It's, oh, my gosh, Mom's hospice is there. Mom's only got 2 weeks. Let's go. Now, what we have seen in the last couple of years is people are calling a little earlier, which is wonderful. But I was asked to come and share what my experiences with hospice have been. All right. The one part you left out on my bio is I am a father of 7, so I go ahead and just get that out of the way. We're not Catholic, we're not Mormon, we're just crazy. 6 boys, 10 to 15, this is a year old, so 6 boys, 10 to 15, and an 18-year-old girl, and she is ready to roll. She is happy to get past it. All right, so yeah, I've been on most people know me from the TV show Hoarders. It's wild. I clean up the messiest homes in the country. And no one would do that by choice, and we'll get to that story in a second. Written a lot of great books. I don't want this to be a commercial. I've got a new show on PBS if you've never seen it. Hoarders is extreme. It's not for everyone. My new show on PBS is called Legacy List, and this is awesome. We go in to your grandma's house, and we visit. We go in the attic, we find something cool, and we just say, hey, tell me about that item. We had one lady that we found a 44-star flag in her attic. And I said, how did you get this? She said, I have no idea. This was my grandfather's trunk. And so, and she was 80-something. We get into the history of it. We find out her grandfather was a train conductor the day Utah became a state. And like any man, he was like, well, I could probably use that fabric again some other day. And he just took the flag and put it in his trunk, and we found it 100 years later. We've been nominated for 2 Emmys. I put that on there just to brag. There's no reason that's not a part of this presentation. I got nominated against Marie Kondo, Joanna Gaines, and Oprah Winfrey. And so we did not win, obviously. All right, how did I get into business? This is important. When I was 24, this is me when I was like 6. When I was 24, my dad, my stepdad, both my grandfathers passed away in 1 year. Bad luck. Wasn't like an awesome bar fight or anything. It just happened. And it was really over about 18 months. And I was the youngest kid in the family, the only one that didn't have a job. I was a very immature 24. And I was the one that was left to clean up the houses. I didn't have anything else going on, so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I got about 6 months in, and I realized I really enjoyed the stories that I was hearing, but it was hard. I was volunteering at a grief camp. I grew up in Virginia. I was volunteering at a grief camp called Comfort Zone Camp, and it was a camp for kids that had lost their parents. So I would volunteer on the weekends with that, and then I would clean out these houses on the weekends. And I remembered my grandfather's advice. My grandfather said, if something sucks, do it as a job because other people will pay you to do it. And I think a lot of us in this room can relate to that business plan. Here I am 25 years later still doing it. Right? What I did not expect was to love the stories so much. All right? So what do I actually do? I clean out houses. I do this all over the country. But what I like is I help people preserve and share their legacy through hearing them tell their stories. The coolest thing about our job is someone will hold up an item, and I'll say, who is this? Oh, it was my mom's. Great. Tell me about your mom. And then they'll tell me everything about their mom. And the whole time we're cleaning, we're going through pictures, we're doing things, but we get to hear incredible stories. Okay? And believe it or not, I can sum up if anyone struggles with stuff, we're not going to take a vote here, but anyone that struggles with stuff, I will tell you the reason we hold on to the stuff is because of the stories and the memories attached to it. Okay? You hold on to stuff because you love the people that stuff reminds you of. That's actually why we hold on to it. Okay? It's the emotions. And so my job is to get people to tell those stories, to separate those emotions so they can get rid of the stuff, but still keep the great memories of the people. Okay? We find a lot of stuff. Sometimes we find bags of cash. Like all the time. Actually, this house, we found over $1 million in cash. We found $15,000 in nickels, dimes, and quarters. It's crazy. You can't take that to the Coinstar. That's too much, by the way. We found a Campbell's Soup can signed by Andy Warhol. I said, how in the world did you know Andy Warhol? She goes, this is in New York City. And she goes, I used to hang out with him in the 70s. I go, well, that's going to be an interesting story. She goes, yeah, I dated one of his friends. And we later found pictures of her and Bob Marley. And I think Bob Marley dated a lot of people in the 70s, but it was a fascinating stuff to find. Right? And then sometimes we find things that have more emotional value than financial value. This is probably the most difficult. Beanie Babies in dining rooms are the most difficult things in my business. Longaberger baskets filled with Beanie Babies as well. Okay. That joke hit. Okay, that ages this room. We understand what's here. This was my grandmother's dining room. Okay. I remember this room because I sat in it every Sunday for 15 years. My family was created in this room at this table. How many of you had an experience like that growing up? Half the room, right? Dining rooms are hard to let go of because of what happens in those rooms, right? Your legacy, your family lore, your legacy is created in those rooms, right? The most challenging thing for us is people think nobody wants their stuff. In fact, that's what I wanted to call my book, but AARP would not let me title it Nobody Wants Your Stuff. Okay. What we found is that people do want your stuff, they just want different stuff. I mean, nobody wants the dining room, but they do want something else. If they know the stories, they do want the stuff, but they have to know the stories. Okay? I have a show called Legacy List. What a legacy list is, I also clean houses professionally, and we use this tool called Legacy List in the field. It's a list of the top 5 items that matter the most in your family. They help you tell your family story. For me, it's my dad's ring. a cookbook from my grandma, a few items that let me tell future generations about my family. Right? I have to tell the story. I tell a lot of stories, and so there we go. That's what we're going to do today. This lady right here, we were cleaning her house. I'll set the stage. It was, she had just sat down for hospice. She called at the right time. So there was nothing urgent. She needed more care. And her family was smart. They called ahead of time. They called early. So there was hospice, some during the week. And she had time to go through her stuff. So it was myself, her 20-something-year-old granddaughter, her 45-year-old daughter, and Miss Lennis was like, I think around 80. And we were going through the pictures. And we get to this picture, and the granddaughter immediately says, "That's not Grandpa." Which is kind of the important part of this story. And she goes, "No, that's Armando. He was my lover the year before I met your grandfather." And then she just flips the picture over and goes to the next picture. And we're like, no, back. We want to learn more about Armando. We need to know more about Armando. And I'm just like, this is amazing. And she goes, I was at MIT. She goes, I was an art history professor at MIT. She goes, he was the Spanish professor. And she goes, he was very good looking. She goes, in fact, I looked him up the other day on Facebook. He's still very good looking. And she goes, that's what Facebook is for, to look up your ex-boyfriends. And we're like, facts, yes, it is. And she goes, we had a torrid love affair. And she goes, then he moved back to Spain, and the next year, I met your grandfather. And we're all kind of floored. The daughter, her jaw is on the floor. And the granddaughter says, "You were a teacher at MIT?" She goes, "I thought you were just a student." She goes, "No, I was the first female adjunct professor at MIT." When you tell the stories, the items become more important. A picture of Armando is what told this granddaughter how incredible her grandma really was. This is why the stories matter. Oh, I love that story. I tell it as much as I possibly can. I love this. It's not about financial value. It's about emotional value. Okay? This is Miss Lennis now. She's still quite beautiful and hilarious. She refused to take that fur coat off the entire cleaning. She was amazing. All right. I've really spent a long time trying to help people celebrate that legacy. And I think that's, when I was encouraged to come here and talk about hospice and what it matters to me, I started to think, all of this happened. My entire career happened because my dad got sick. If my dad had not gotten sick and died, I would not be helping people in doing what I do for the last 25 years. So when I think about it, for me, my career is because my father died. And then when I really thought about it, it's because he died. It's because how he died. That's what's so important. And we're going to talk about that. Why does hospice matter to me? Well, Phil, we'll talk about two people. This is my grandma. My grandma on the left, the beautiful Ann Luck. Obviously, we're very young here. I was 20. Gosh, that was around the same time. I was 23, 24. My grandma was my best friend. She's a hilarious woman, just wild. Wild. Did not care what anyone else thought in the right way. And that's my great aunt on the other side. She did not, boy, what an example of who to call the right place. She did not get help early. She did not go into senior living at the right time. And so her end-of-life experience was really not very positive. For my grandma, it was extremely positive. She went into, I got a bunch of pictures of her. She's always smiling, always happy. This is at her best friend's funeral. Look how happy she is. All right? It's crazy. Well, she wanted to beat her, man. She was absolutely set on being the last one to go. That was her mission. She put it on her vision board. She told everybody, I'm going to live longer than you. She always joked that she would be at our funerals. Her dad lived to 102, so she was determined to beat us all. She's 94 in that picture. Hilarious lady. This is her on her 95th birthday. She did not talk about hospice in a pleasant way, but she used it the right way. She loved it. She was in hospice 6 times. Right? And she talked about it as it was prison. She's like, I'm breaking out, man. I'm not in it anymore. And it was the first time I learned that hospice is not just for end of life. I didn't know that. It's for a better life. And she joked about it, but man, I mean, she was in and out 6 times. And she would tell you, I'm beating it. I'm getting out next week. I can't wait. And she did talk a lot like it was prison. It was kind of funny. She was in there 6 times. My favorite memory of her, I'll talk about a speech. This is, in fact, like 3 years ago. I was doing a speech in Richmond, Virginia, where she still lived. And we didn't tell anybody because we knew she'd find a way to get there, right? And she's, 94. She's on hospice for like the 5th time or 6th time, but she's stubborn as can be. And we were like, it was snow, it was bad weather. We're just like, don't tell Nanny. And I even like blocked my grandmother for like 2 days on Facebook so that she couldn't see it, so that she wouldn't come. My mom agreed. No one told my grandmother. Sure enough, I get up on stage, and who's on the front row? My grandmother's sitting there in a wheelchair with a caregiver. We don't know who it is. We still to this day don't know how she paid for it. She has no control of her finances. We don't know what she did, but she convinced someone to drive her there in the snow and get on front stage. Right? My grandmother always did what she wanted to do. But she learned to love hospice. She loved her caregivers. She actually had quite a relationship with her chaplain. And about 3 months ago, ironically, when I got asked to do this, I said, hey, I want to talk about my grandma, because my grandma was still alive. Well, she passed away 2 months ago because she was ready. She discussed it. She said, hey, look, I can't. She called us all. She did a Zoom call for everybody. And she said, look, I can't taste my food anymore. They're putting me on liquids. She goes, I haven't told you guys, but they got to put me on a crane to change my diaper. She's like, this isn't living. And she goes, I'm good. I appreciate you guys. If you can come see me, fine, but I'm not waiting. She died 2 weeks later. And she lived every single minute. And when I think about hospice, it enabled her to do it her way. She did it right. She had fun. She didn't look at it as an end-of-life thing. For her, it was more of a tool to just keep going until she chose not to. And I love that. As I get older, I think, God, I hope I can have that confidence and that control. But she had the team to support her. So when I think about her, I was like, man, I mean, my kids never met a single man that raised me. But my kids think it's normal to have a great grandma. And they get to do cool stuff with her, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. So she did break out one last time, but that's it. And that's my mom in the middle. We're hoping she makes 96. That's the goal. All right. This is my father. This is the man that started it all for me. I found a lot of pictures of me looking young today when I was putting this together last night. Look at my dad in the Canadian tuxedo. I just realized that. The jeans on jeans. I love it. I love Air Jordans, if you can't tell. These are my fake Air Jordans. I got them from CVS for $10, and we just put a swoosh off of an old pair of Nikes, and we colored them in. I couldn't afford it, but it was awesome. I loved them. And they were like size 10, and I think I was like a 5. Yeah. All right. This is my dad. My dad was 52 when he passed away. My dad had a different diagnosis situation. But I come from a strong bunch of people. This picture is taken the day after my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He called me. My dad was in advertising in the 70s. If you've ever seen Mad Men, they were kind of like, they didn't really tell you how bad it was. All right, if you've ever seen, it was a wild time in life. And my dad lived in New York and Richmond, and there's a reason all those guys died in their 50s. But my dad, he thought he was having a heart attack. He called me, he said, hey, can you come get me? I think I'm having a heart attack. I want to go to the hospital. And I go, well, that's actually what ambulances are for, Dad. But yeah, now come get you. So I come and get him. We go to the hospital, and I'll compare it to here and maybe, what's a big city is Baltimore a big city that nobody would really want to live in from here? Is that a fair? Okay. So basically, he lived here. Sorry, maybe that was the wrong question. All right. Can we agree that none of us would want to live in D.C.? Can we agree on that? All right, well, let's go there. All right. So basically, we took my dad. He lived in Richmond, Virginia. He lived downtown. And we took him out to the suburbs. And we get him to the hospital. And he's like, I think I'm having a heart attack. And they said, no, sir, your left lung is completely collapsed and your right lung is only got about a third left. He's like, you have cancer. You got 3 weeks. And he said, look, let's go home, wrap up your affairs. We can have you back here today. We'll get you in the hospital. We'll get you on medication. You'll be fine. You won't feel anything. And he grabbed the guys. It was one of his friends, the doctor. And he grabbed the guy and he goes, I've spent my entire life trying to stay out of the West End. He goes, I am not going to die here. And so basically convert that to, I've spent my entire life trying to stay out of Washington, D.C. I am not going to die here. Right? And I remember watching him do this. And he goes, get me home, get me hospice. I want to be home. And we said, okay. So this was the first one in my family to die. So my brother and I were like, okay, what does that mean? So we actually called our chaplain at church and said, what do I do? She said, oh, there's a really good hospice company. Call them, it'll be okay. So he went to the beach the next day with his girlfriend. They figured it out. He came home. Hospice was the best thing that ever happened to my dad. My dad could not be put in a box. My dad was very creative. He wanted to do a few things because he knew he had 3 weeks. And they said, look, he's going to be on, they put him on oxygen immediately. And I remember that he had like 300 or 400 feet of tubes and it was only supposed to go like 100 feet. And he would walk around the house and he wanted to have one big last meeting. And so he had this thing called he would do a creative party. He was in advertising. So he would actually bring people in the creative industry and then invite all these other people in the advertising industry to his house. And he had a chef, his favorite chef came and made a meal for everybody in his kitchen because everyone knew that my dad was going to die. And so he made a big meal. My dad kept saying it's the Last Supper. It was kind of awkward. But he would show how the chef showed how he cleaned the plate. And he goes, when I received the plate from everybody, I look what's been moved around by a fork. I see what's been eaten, what hasn't been eaten. And he goes, and so middle of the night, I'll change the recipe and how I played it based upon the response of what we get. And as a kid, I thought that was fascinating. I was like, oh, this guy's getting feedback. He's changing everything he does. And I learned that literally 2 weeks before my dad died at my dad's house. It was fascinating. So he did that, and then about 4 days later, knock on the door. And my brother and I are just the kid. We're there with the hospice folks, and they're really teaching us, honestly. The hospice folks were teaching us how to be caregivers. We were very young men. We didn't know what we were doing, and we were on our own. So we were really lucky to have this hospice team teaching us, to be honest. And they gave us the space to learn. But the doorbell rings at like 7:30 in the morning, and it's his business partner. And Bill, so I'll never get his name, Bill. And Bill, I go, what are you doing here, Bill? He's like, your dad called me. He said he wanted to have a meeting. I go, my dad is upstairs, dude. He's like pretty much out of it. And then all of a sudden, my dad comes down, and he's in a suit, and he's got a bottle of scotch. It is 7:30 in the morning. And he goes, Bill, I'm glad you're here. There's stuff I want to talk about. And so they pour scotch, and my dad clearly wanted to have his last scotch with a guy, his buddy. And they sit down at the table, and they're telling stories, and Bill pours the scotch. Bill, it's 7:30 in the morning. He drinks his. My dad just keeps pushing his over to Bill. And so, unfortunately, Bill didn't want to be rude. Bill has four glasses of Dewar's before 8 a.m. And my dad says goodbye. He goes, Bill, I love you, man. Thanks for coming. Hugs him. Says this is goodbye. He goes back upstairs. And Bill looks at me. He goes, dude, I am wasted. I can't go to work. He's like, what? He's like, can I sleep in the guest room? I'm like, yeah, man, that's good. And then a day later, that weekend, we decide to have my dad's funeral. He wants to be there. He wants to hear the stories. So he basically threw a roast. And everyone came. And as a son, I got to hear all the stories. I got to hear every story. Some of them I didn't want to hear, like at all. And I heard them all. And it went way into the night. I still have Dewar's left over 25 years later from that party. Everybody brought a bottle of Dewar's for my dad. We had about 100 bottles of Dewar's. We're like, he is going to die in 2 weeks. Like, we don't need that much scotch. But it was amazing. And I realize now when I was asked to talk about hospice, it's like, man, if I hadn't had that guidance And I hadn't had that space to really experience that time with my dad. I don't know how I would have grieved through this. I can tell you what happened after my dad died. I ended up going to Hawaii to see an ex-girlfriend for a week. I was like, I need a break. And then 9/11 happened, and I couldn't get home. And so I ended up staying in Hawaii for 6 months. Very amazing spiritual place. And when I came home, I had to start cleaning all the houses. And I cleaned 4 houses. And I am still today on a high from how my dad went. I don't have the grief that I see a lot of people, because I got to say goodnight to my dad every night for 3 weeks. I got to say goodbye. I got to hear all the stories that you want to hear as a son. I mean, he said goodbye. I got that. I mean, I guess there's caregivers here, so you know, like, my dad was gone for like 2 days. He was in pretty much, you know, a medical, he wasn't in a coma, but he was gone. And he wasn't with us anymore. And then he woke up the last minute. And he's like, man, I love you. What did you do? What did you marry so-and-so? He's asking me all these questions. And I'm like, this is my father. Like, and he said, I love you. He said, who's here? I said, your dad's here. Or I said, I mean, your mom is here. And Ernie, my brother's here. So I go get my brother. He comes up. He says goodbye to me. He says goodbye to my brother. I said, hey, your mom's downstairs. We carry her up. He says goodbye to his mom. And then he looks at all three of us and he says, I love you guys. I'm going to close my eyes. Probably not going to wake up again. And he did. And I'm still on a high from this experience, right? I got to say goodbye. I got to close that door. When he died, later that afternoon, the hospice, I said, that's the most insane thing. I mean, that's like spiritual beyond a level that I'd never even experienced. And she's like, happens all the time. I'm so glad you got to experience it. She's like, not everybody gets to. And we had a guide, right? To that moment forward, I thought they were just there for my dad. I didn't realize they were there for us, right? We were able to say goodbye in the best way possible. And that created, for me, I thought it was about saying goodbye. I thought it was about end of life, and I was totally wrong. I didn't know what hospice was for. I think it's kind of like my industry. My industry is cleaning up estates after someone's gone. You don't know you need help in that until you know you need help in that. Right? It's a very immediate need. For me now, I kind of go, when they asked me to do this, I was like, please, I would love to talk about how. I was like, I didn't realize how much it changed my life. When we get to a house now on the cleaning side, we ask them, is hospice engaged? They're like, oh, it's too early. Man, it is never too early. Let me tell you that right now. Get them in earlier, man, because it gives them a better quality of life. And not just the person, their entire family. It gave me the space to truly love my dad. When I couldn't handle the caregiving, they were there for us. They gave me advice. They gave me guidance. It was everything I needed. I didn't know that until later in life. But now I realize how important it was, right? My dad got to do it his way, which for my dad is really all that mattered. He fought to do it his way his entire life, and he didn't have to fight it at the end. And I think that's what was so cool for us, right? And then most importantly, it gave me the foundation to go and help people. I ended up, when I got back, I had to clean out that house. And my dad had left me, it was like $10,000 in life insurance, which I thought was $1 million. And in Richmond, Virginia, that was like a year rent. So I was good. And it gave me a year to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Okay. So when I talk about stuff, this is my dad's chair, by the way. I always have this in my classes. That's me and my dad on his chair. I would sit and wait in that chair for my dad every night, and he would come home. And I would just wait. Well, now I sit in that chair with my boys. Right? And now my kids, by the way, are no athlete. The girl's an athlete. None of the boys are athletes. They're all musicians. And so there's no carrying them on the shoulder after they score a touchdown at my house. This is our reading chair, actually. And when they finish a book, they sit in that chair. And when they're on the last chapter, we all Harry Potter's a big thing for our kids. And we sit there. When they get to the last chapter, we all clap for them. We get excited, and then we scream for them. And then when they finish the chapter, they close the book, and they tell us what the book's about. Right? That's the reading chair. My dad would make fun of us for doing that. I'll tell you that right now. But that's what works for my boys. And guess who wants that chair now? Every one of my boys. Because they know the stories. They know the stories about my dad. They know the stories about everybody, and they want the items because they know the stories. For me, I wanted to quickly talk about why hospice has made a difference for me. I wouldn't have the life I have. In fact, the hospice lady is who introduced me to Comfort Zone Camp, which is where I volunteered with other kids that had lost I didn't know about that resource. I ended up becoming a volunteer there. I ended up meeting my first wife at that camp. I ended up having my kids, my 3 boys, my entire life. I have them because of something a hospice nurse happened to mention to me on the fly. That's important, right? It's all connected. I hope you guys will think about this today. I tried to use some funny stories that make you laugh. Because as we all know in this industry, if you can't laugh, man, it is hard. Right? And I think for me, I've learned for us, when we work with families, the stories is the most important way to help them. And you got to give them the space. You got to hear those stories. So I want to challenge you guys, when you go home tonight, find out, ask yourself, why does hospice matter to you? How has it helped you in your personal life, or how has it helped one of your clients? Right? I want people, I think of my father, I want people to live like a legend. My dad, everywhere I go, someone goes, "Are you Ed Paxton's son?" Still to this day. In fact, I was in Colorado a couple weeks ago, and I was on stage, and this lady goes, "Are you Ed Paxton's son?" And I said, "Yes, I am." "Why?" And she goes, "You prance across the stage like your dad did." I was like, awesome. Okay? People live on because the stories are told. Okay? And you all are at a point in their life where they're ready to tell the stories, and they have the space and the time to share them. So I really want to encourage you guys, whatever you are in this caregiving journey, get people to start sharing those stories, right? And you've got a sheet on your paper on the table. I'm a really good storyteller. That's what I do, right? You may not be a good storyteller. These 10 questions, if you are a horrible storyteller, you will get people to tell stories with these 10 questions, all right? Believe it or not, they start off really simple and they get really complicated. Where'd you grow up? How long did you live there? What did you do for fun in high school? That's my favorite. Everyone thinks grandma just sat in the corner with her purse. Right? Grandma was all state, softball. People don't know that. Right? First job and how much do they get paid? That's probably my favorite question. I did this at a senior living community a couple weeks ago. We added a new question. What's the coolest invention you've seen in your lifetime? And the lady, she goes, "Well, cars are pretty amazing." She goes, "Bathrooms are outdoor bathrooms. She was indoor bathrooms. That changed my life." And she goes, "But hair curlers were pretty awesome too." And she goes, "I'm probably going to go with hair curlers." And I was like, okay, all right. But that's the point, right? Whatever their question is, we had the time to sit with them and hear those stories. So I want you guys to take these back with you. I hope it'll help you. It does really escalate to, what inspires you. And then my favorite one thing is, what's the one thing you want everyone to know about you before you're gone? I've gotten to some pretty amazing people. I got to interview the 5th guy on the moon. He was really angry that he wasn't the 4th. He's like, "Everybody else has got a school." He goes, "Do you know my name?" I was like, "No, sir." He's like, "Exactly." I was like, "You've been angry this long?" He's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, what do you want everybody to know?" And he goes, It's actually a fascinating story. But he goes, "I don't know, I've just been angry too long." He goes, "It's not really," he goes, "I outlived all those guys, so we're good." And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You're interviewing me, right?" He goes, "Why are you interviewing me?" And I go, "The other 4 are dead. That's why we're here. Let's be honest." And he goes, "See?" He goes, "Sometimes it's about outliving," I just thought it was really cool. Yeah. So please, I want to inspire you to go. Find these stories, tell these stories. And if I have to truly answer what's the most important thing I learned from hospice, it is never too early to call. Both of those stories, I had incredible life-changing events because hospice helped me at the time I needed it. And it's enabled me to help millions of families. All right, that's it. Thank you, guys.